Okay, and panelists, we're making our way up. Panelists are coming up. We have a really interesting panel, but I want to first say thank you to Anupam because as I was thinking about putting this panel together, I was saying it would be really nice to do an overview of what's going on before we started talking to specific companies about examples of where they are in the process and what they're doing and where what problems they've seen. And I started putting my thoughts together about that, and I got a presentation about that big, and then I said, that's not what what this panel's about. So Anupam, thank you very much for really putting together the foundation. I think one of the things that I was thinking about while Anupam was talking is that we're so early into this new phase, this digital transformation of business, that some of us, and we're not sure what the lingo really is and what automation really means in what situations. I look at RPA, robotic process automation, as the foundation of automation in certain areas, in specific applications. Yeah, why don't you come up and sit down? Automation's been here forever. It's just there have been companies doing things like RPA for 30 years. They just called them macros, and they worked with the IT part of the business and not with not with the business side. The business side might not even have known what was going on, but scheduling processes in the IT business has been done by robotic processes, and you're seeing him smile, for a long time. So there's a lingo issue there that started. The question of some of the phases and the direction that companies are going in, I think we're going to find is that lots of different companies are going in different ways, starting from different places, which makes answering the question, what is this, a little difficult. But we're in a shaping phase. And when Anupam put the environment picture up with companies in different quadrants, that's a hard thing to do because there's companies in lots of those different quadrants. And you got to if you put them in one place, they're not in the other, and they're really all over the place. I think one of the big differences, one of the things that helps me understand what's going on, is that automation itself is coming out of what used to be point solutions. When we talked about technology, we talked about technology being point solution driven, and we were looking to enterprise solutions. We're now in the situation where a lot of companies are doing point solutions for RPA, point solutions for intelligent, cognitive automation. What the AI-enabled enterprise to me is when those point solutions start coming together and being controlled over the top by what used to be called middleware. But now it's intelligent middleware that's talking to multiple systems in multiple places and changing the way decisions are made in business because those silos of point solutions are now connected. So that's just one way that I've been thinking about it, and as Anupam was talking, that became more and more clear in my mind that the AI-enabled enterprise, when we're looking at it from an enterprise position, is where there are multiple specific applications going on that may be automated or intelligent, but they're now being looked at as a more of a unified, holistic way through AI intelligence at the top, connecting things that may not have been connected in the past. So with that, I've got a great panel here. I'm really excited to get into this. Why don't you introduce yourselves, in fact, rather than me doing that and you doing it again. If you could just introduce yourselves a little, tell us where you're from, what you're doing, and where you stand, where you are right now in that terrible word, journey.
Sure. My name is Partha Bal, and I'm from VMware. I'm sure many of you know about VMware. We are the industry leader in the cloud infrastructure as well as workspace mobility environment and the products that we bring together. Now, within VMware, my role sits within a group called Business Transformation. And as a part of that, I lead business architecture, process excellence, and innovation, which is bringing some of these things together to solve a business problem, essentially. We are, just to use some of these language and the terminology that we just talked about, we are in the very early stage of adoption of RPA in its nascent form, in its pure form, quote unquote, not augmented with cognitive or not augmented with artificial intelligence yet. But we do have a lot of application as well as usage of artificial intelligence by itself to drive predictability, to drive business problem, to drive insight from the data we collect as well as solve business problems.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Philip Say. I'm with Sutherland, and I'm part of the digital and innovation team for Sutherland. Sutherland is a 30-year-old company. It's in the Gartner quadrant. It's the top right quadrant in terms of contact center operations and services. But the digital team is actually a fairly new team. We're a team of software people. I'm a software product guy by career background, as well as software application designers and user researchers. And so we're part of this unit, and we take a very user-centric approach to solving problems. So as a result, there's, as we're all recognizing, I think, throughout the industry, there's lots of opportunity to improve user experiences, productivity, and so forth through the advance and emergence of these tools. So we're very fortunate as a team to be able to work with some amazing clients across our 9 verticals to actually start to exercise these tools and exercise use cases.
Hi everyone, I'm Vasily. I lead customer acquisition for Tesla right now. I hope you own a car or plan to own it in the future, so I'll pitch you the company because I do customer acquisition. What's that? Yeah, we can talk about this. So we can talk about that as well. So in terms of what it means is we help customers discover the website. In addition to obviously all the Elon tweets, etc., we still kind of bring people to the website. And once you're on the website, we'll help you understand the difference, what the cars are, what the difference is. And then ultimately, if you're ready to buy, then buy. If you're not ready to buy that, then test drive, sign up for news from us. It's basically all this product growth tactics and design your vehicle, but not buy yet, right? That's the Tesla story. And before that, I did growth for Uber. On the driver's side, which is probably the most challenging side of the story, as you know, because for riders, Uber is kind of a no-brainer. Everyone wants it, or Lyft, depending on how you feel about the company culture. But on the driver's side, it's a lot more complexity because you have to compete against people who work for McDonald's, against people who work everywhere else in the world. Like the workplace is genuinely a very competitive space. So those are 2 kinds of complex problems I've been solving so far, and automation is dear to my heart because you cannot build large scalable business without automating something. It's just in the nature of those startups, as Anupam presented in his keynote. And the second is I feel like this whole space requires a little bit of more thoughtfulness because the product approach generally is to understand the root cause of the problem, to understand the customer problem, to understand the root cause of the problem, and then go solve the problem. And the way I feel about automation is it's frequently becoming basically it's valuable by itself. So how about we just do it manually and then we automate it? So that's the situation I'm seeing more and more in business and in products. So trying to bring kind of more thoughtfulness to this whole space.
My name is Sumit Amar, and I work at Visa, and I lead the innovation development team in San Francisco. And also parts of my responsibilities are to lead a team in Dubai. So what we do at San Francisco Innovation Center is that we work with several clients, our banks, issuers, acquirers, merchants even, and we work with them to co-create some ideas and refine the ideas and build some initial stages of the product and to do some pilots. And before I came to Visa 2.5 years ago, I was at EA for a couple of years and also spent about 9 years at Microsoft, mostly just building products, and I have been from the engineering background and enjoying doing that kind of work. And the other thing I'll mention is a quick disclaimer. My opinions are my own, not my company's. So just to be out there.
Thank you. And so you see we have a variety of industries represented and a variety of experiences here. And one of the questions that came up during Anupam's presentation was where do companies start? How do they choose their early projects? So could we go down the line again and maybe start from Samit this time? What were the first projects that you started working on, and how did you start working on them? How did you get involved?
I'm generally not involved with the acquisition of or buying a product. I'm mostly from the engineering standpoint. I analyze different products sometimes, and which works best for the tools that we have to use. So I generally don't have a very much. I mean, my role is engineering, right? So I don't really go and say, hey, I want to talk to these 5 vendors and 5. But I think to your question, right? The analysis that we do is based on objective output of these platforms, right? We have a big VMware shop, so VMware is here, right? So we've used that a lot for a long time, and we did a lot of analysis of comparing that platform with the competitors, and then we also did some with OpenStack, and that's why. So we basically just create a matrix of how we what platform would work for us from the technical standpoint.
Did you look at platforms that supported multiple applications, or did you look at those platforms from the specific use case or project that was underway?
See, I mean, again, maybe it's not a good question that I can answer, because I was not involved with making that decision. I was building applications on top of the stuff that was already decided, and it was acquired. But in the innovation center, we basically are free to use the technology that fits for that use case, and I think that's the easiest way to make a decision, right? If we want to write some tools and want to do machine learning data analysis, it's very easy that, hey, if you can use Python or R or something else, right, which is easier where the libraries already exist. So I think there is some decision making that developers do, engineers do, but then also when there is investment required, so that business people come into picture, and that's something that I haven't had the exposure of.
Nice.
And the question is the early projects, right?
Early projects, and also marry that a little with products serving those projects.
Sounds good. So there are actually 2 examples for both Tesla and Uber. My early projects are always about automation, and actually now, the more I think about it, it's all about when you come into the company, you want to build credibility, you just want some high impact pretty fast. And usually those projects just tend to be some form of automation, like something is being done inefficiently or manually, and just machine can just solve those better. 2 quick examples on Tesla side. When you get prepared to pick up your vehicle, once you've paid already and you just need to pick up your vehicle, it sounds like it's a no-brainer, you just come and pick it up, right? Life is a lot more complex because you need to provide driver's license, insurance, financing, and we need to decide, are you going to be trading in your vehicle or not? We need to price your vehicle. There's actually lots and lots of stuff happening before you pick up your Tesla. I'm even thinking we're building products a lot more complex than many other companies build their whole business on, right? Like we have trade-in model, we have credit checks, we have financing there, we have all the validation that Uber has, so it's pretty complex. And what we've learned from our experience is that customers are often coming unprepared, or data gets outdated, and basically the humans are solving all these problems. And the simple automation we're putting in place is like, can you please confirm all the information you've provided so far is precise, right? That's a basic question we ask. And we've noticed that in many cases, the answer is actually no. And we noticed it saves customer lots of grief, and it saves us lots of contracts which we regenerate. It's one of the key metrics we're focusing right now, because again, if you bought Tesla, you might have seen where your contract got regenerated while you're waiting for the vehicle. This first simple story where if you ask a customer, is the information precise, right? You don't even need to get human in place to get customer service substantially better. Quick story on Uber side. Again, drivers, remember San Francisco or some other city, 2014, Uber is growing super fast. Everything is done manually. Like engineers are building stuff as fast as they can, but again, there is a lot more ideas than can be realistically built by engineers. So what I realized is drivers are always a limiting factor in this business. You always have a lot more riders than you have drivers, right? Like as soon as you build up your driver base, your business grows. You cannot focus on just ridership. And what prevents drivers from start driving, in our case, was that the lack of automation around, are you eligible or not? Like human actually was allowed to green light you or not allowed, right? Depending on, did you give us your driver's license? Again, do you have an insurance? Do you have a vehicle? Do you have all of those things? There was a human in the last step. And the craziest stories is, as a driver, if you submit all the information at 6 p.m. and the human went home at 5:59, so you basically need to wait till 9 a.m. next day. You cannot work this whole period of time between 6 and 9. So the simple automation around, does this person have this? Does this person have this? Does this person have this? Go, right? It was insanely impactful. It was actually one of the biggest wins even in the course of 3-year history. So automation is great when it's done right. That's the story.
Oh, okay, great. So I had a little more prep time for this question. So we have about, within Sutherland, there's about, let's say, between 50 to 55 projects right now that involve, touch, utilize some form of the ML or AI techniques and tools. And an easy way I'll try to organize these and segment them is, there's a grouping certainly around customer support and care situations. So think of this as your classic troubleshooting issues. We're helping a client, for example, they have a technical product, there's repeated calls, there's repeated inquiries about certain issues. How can we predict what those are, kind of map the case to the proper knowledge article. And the whole game there is to try to abate and deflect the very expensive technical support channel as much as possible without compromising the customer care experience. The second one, which I think is really interesting, is on selling things. As you know, digital mobile channels are much more easy to access. These messaging environments are much more frictionless, and every utterance or statement that's actually communicated through these environments sort of can indicate a degree of interest. And if you're able to apply an algorithm against that, you're able to score those leads or those interactions a little more intelligently. That's probably the second case, I'd say. There's a third category I like to call enterprise processes, or things that happen inside the workplace. And 2 examples I'm thinking of right now are notable for us are in HR and recruiting. So at Sutherland, as you know, we recruit at scale and velocity. And what we need to do is we need to get our pipeline of candidates in, and we're bound by the number of recruiters that we actually can hire. So we challenge ourselves and said, how can we supercharge our online channels without, again, compromising things in terms of the integrity of the interview or qualifications of the candidate. And so we're now starting to use messaging as a mechanism to begin these dialogues, these conversations with candidates earlier in the process, and then workflow them into our traditional recruiting processes. Then there's the fourth category, which it's analogous to almost the analytics kind of. Do we recall the big data era? Can I say that without aging myself? But this decisioning support era, where we're applying algorithms and machine learning to help. We get hired to do a lot of things around doing churn management and helping renew customers for certain services or products. And so many of our clients are asking us to say, hey, you guys are ingesting this fire hose of information every month, every week. Can you please give me some degree of better insight as to what's really occurring at these events? And so now we're actually exercising some of these ML-based techniques.
We'll talk about a lot of the things that are being presented in depth as we go further. I'd love to get into a dialogue, but let's hold that for a bit. Pardon me,
Yeah. So as I at the beginning mentioned that the AI and the RPA we haven't connected yet. They are still in their own purest form that are delivering or intending to deliver value in our company. But the journey on both sides is associated to the company's growth. So BMI as a company, we grew very fast. And as a result, and any enterprise company have multiple systems. So on the RPA side, before we even had RPA, we had the tendency to put people behind the process, manual process, when things need to be connected between the 2 systems. And as we grew, our IT resources, they were all going into driving big transformation projects. So everything that needed to be connected were manual. We put resources into low-cost center, outsourced, et cetera, et cetera. Out of that, we started to see a lot of challenge of nimbleness of our process and ability to adjust as quickly as well as. So given that opportunity, given in the industry, RPA was getting momentum, we realized that there is an opportunity to do that. So we started exploring ideas of where we can adopt. And we are in the very early stage, about a year into the process of applying the RPA concepts of actually replicating the work that the human beings were doing with hands and legs and getting it automated at low cost. So that's the RPA journey. On the AI side, it also grew out of the company's journey because we went from one single product company to a portfolio of products. So as we grew from one product to two products, three products, we wanted to find out how can we sell this additional product to our customers. So typical modeling for propensity modeling, cross-sell, upsell that required AI type of a algorithm and predictability. Also, we wanted to make our product much more intelligent and move our support model from more reactive to predictive and preemptive, which required understanding the customer's environment and changes and anticipate when the customers are going to have problems with our products and be proactively guiding the customer saying that you might anticipate this problem, have you done this, right? So those two kind of the scenario that is tied to the company's growth that got us thinking about how and how can we solve these problems. And so we started adopting AI as well as the RPA on the automation side.
So I want to just point out something that I'm thinking about, maybe others are thinking about. You were talking about predictive capabilities, and we laughed earlier about the era of big data. But I think what we're really seeing is the coming together and the maturing of the era of big data, cloud computing, mobile, social, all those acronyms of 5 years ago that we were presenting at conferences like this. We're seeing them starting to come together, and the predictive abilities are becoming what is now called AI. So I just want to provide that context. But now I want to go backwards a little. When I've started working with clients in RPA specifically, but also in AI type things, the first thing they want to do, and the first thing that many companies need to do, is create that business case and the proof of concept. And sometimes that problem that I've experienced has been that the proof of concept is so small you can't extrapolate it across the enterprise, and you have this lack of connection between proof of concept and the viable business case that you want. So I'd like to ask you guys what how you started. Did you do proofs of concept, and where did those lead? How did those evolve? And anybody who wants to start.
I guess I can give an example of the RPA side now. Yes, we did I would say piloting, not so much a proof of concept to create the business case, because the concept was compelling enough where I was able to get one of my executives to sign up to say, you know what, go invest some money, explore what's possible, right? And that's how we got into it. And very quickly out of that, we were able to demonstrate value, right? So that is how we started our RPA journey, not saying, go build a big business case, tell me what's the ROI and all of that. The positioning was unique enough. We saw an opportunity where we can move from this whole notion of labor arbitrage to labor automation and the potential associated with that, where we were able to get some funding to say, go invest in it. And then quickly we show value, and then now it's kind of very quickly becoming a high demand area where people are coming to the team to say, I need it, I want it.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
How much time did it take for the first pilot to finish and then finally the business to understand that there is a value in it?
So just to give you a quick, I think we sold it and we created a campaign within the company initially where we sold kind of what the possibilities are. And we also tied that to kind of what the value proposition, because people have there's a connotation to this concept of robotic process automation to say jobs are taken away and all of that. So we spin it off to say it's actually freeing up the human minds and brains to innovate and do better work than the mechanical work. And that got a lot of people excited about. So initially we had a lot of opportunities. We were fortunate enough to have enough demand and supply. So we picked one and showed the value. And it took about, I would say, 6 months to showcase. But the challenge really started to become afterwards. Once we showcased that, we were not ready to scale our the delivery side to the demand. So that took a little bit more time to mature, or even to make the attempt to maturity and to deliver at scale. That became the big problem then.
So that's a happy path you want to be.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, Eric, maybe I'll just add one another perspective, we use a tool around user sort of journey mapping. And that's been a supplemental to a lot of the traditional methodologies or processes, how you get cases closed. But we found that has actually been quite instructive for us, useful for us, because I think many people, especially non-technical experts, often or leaders, they often get confused by the terminology and all the collection of tools that we have. But they're very understanding they're very empathetic of what the consumer is going through, or potentially what the employee is going through for a specific process. And so this journey mapping tool that we have, and it's commonly available in the industry, but it's been a really good device for isolating where the friction points are in the journey, and then you obviously quantify what that's worth. So just maybe kind of another tool to add in the toolkit.
Yes, and our approach to pilots in product world, I would just call it maybe product experimentation, is maybe a replacement or a supplementary view on what the pilots could be. And what it means is you just question every single decision you make. Instead of assuming that it's probably good for the company and for the customer, you actually launch every single product as an experiment. You can think of it as there is 3 phases. I call it alpha is phase 1, where you just launch something as fast as possible just to see, can customers even engage with it? Does it make any sense, right? You don't measure any data. You're not instrumenting like major variables. You're not even running any scientific experiments yet. You're just seeing, like, does it even work? Like, is it completely off or not? If it's completely off, you basically just shut it down. And maybe sometimes you give it a chance to move on to the next stage, but in some cases, the product is just so ridiculously out of fit that you can just shut it down based on this feedback. But if not, then you move into the next phase. Again, I call it beta, but it's genuinely a split test where a set of customers get access to new experience versus a set of customers get access to the old, unchanged experience. And then you need to define set of, again, success metrics, key success metrics, and ideally you need to also understand what implications could be to your company and to your customers outside of your area. Because in many cases you can create a huge value on your particular side of the business, but huge cost and nightmare for the customer in some other area. So this split test is a little bit of an art. And then once you run a split test and the evidence shows that this is great, it's basically the same decision making as with pilots, right? The pilot was successful. Let's now move forward into the full rollout. And full rollout is you replace customer experience with the new desired customer experience. So that's, I guess, how the product managers do pilots these days by running experiments.
Yeah, I'll just add to that point and extend that a little bit. That's one approach. The other approach actually could be to have a pilot and then do instrument the data how the users are doing. Like maybe you're doing that for A/B testing purposes only. Maybe you're doing that just to get the feedback from the customer implicitly how they understand your product, and then that'll help you define the user experience and do something better. And I want to mention one point which Eric mentioned earlier about the big data. We use this term. Actually, AI is older than we generally give it credit for, right? So 260 odd years ago, Thomas Bayes comes up with a theorem, a Bayesian theorem, right, for Bayesian inference. What it is really that given certain hypothesis, what is the likelihood of something going to happen, right? And lots of machine learning models are based on Bayesian theorem, bias classifier, hidden Markov model, so many things. And 20 years ago, these same algorithms were being used by the scientists. They didn't make a lot of sense because we didn't have enough data. Now we have enough data. More than enough data, actually. Like people are scared about it. So I think that's why I think these models are making more sense. That's why big data, we don't need to call it big data because it's big anyways, right? Why use the redundant term? So I think that's why the more users data you can capture, if they, of course you'll have to probably ask them as well, hey, can I instrument you? Do you want to participate in a customer improvement program, right? That's what they do actually when you're submitting your yes thing to that, right? So I think the more data that you have, it can help you make a more informed decision on whether this product is going to work in the industry or not. And that's why these learning models are making a lot of sense.
Let me take us down a little bit of a different path. If we were in this room, well, I guess this room wasn't here 15 years ago, but if we were in a room like this 15 years ago, we'd be talking about outsourcing. And we'd be asking the question, what is the driver of outsourcing? And the answer uniformly would have been cost, cost, cost. And somebody in the back of the room might have said, but I think there's some innovation there. With the AI transformation going on now, can you talk about your company's drivers and what the expectations are in the long run?
What do you want to start?
Anyone you want.
So at VMware, as I described the story of RPA, our situation was not to get cost advantage. And again, luckily VMware is a profitable company. We have our good reputation, so we didn't have that pressure like a hardware manufacturing company where you have thin margin and all that. However, where we did see the potential is one, business scale. So we were not able to scale because of this human interfaces in between. So that was one. And the second is, how do you redeploy and take really the power of the human brain and the human thinking to really do the work that they are designed to do as opposed to just the mechanical work. So our equation for that was more redeploy innovation as well as scale, as opposed to cost advantage for RPA.
I think for us, at Sutherland, the framework we rely upon, quite frankly, is around experience. I mean, there's been a lot of research that suggests that brands that exceed other competitors from a experience perspective can typically outperform each other. And I often kind of always compare Lyft versus Uber. And you know, if you really look under the guts of the experience, you get to very concrete examples as to how one particular service applies the technology relative to the other, and then how that translates into the user experience. So for us, that's a very easy framework for us to utilize and kind of help drive decisions. But yeah, I think that's it, and then that can be applied even from consumer settings to employee settings as well.
Yeah, I would say both of my companies do use outsourcing. Uber is probably even better example because you know that there are a small number of engineers, let's say single-digit thousands, but there is tens of thousands of customer support representatives basically in probably like 10% of all the world countries. Like there is India, huge office, Manila, Russia, like everywhere we have customer support, right? Because one is we need all the languages, and in San Francisco you probably cannot find enough people who speak all the languages to handle all the tickets. But second, even from the cost standpoint, yes, cost is important. As a company, you don't just service your customers, you also service your shareholders and employees, right? And if you cannot get costs under control, then your shareholders will suffer, your employees will arguably as well suffer because you probably cannot afford these gourmet coffee drinks or, I don't know, some other free lunches. So it's actually a trade-off business makes. What I think is important to still realize is that like the why question is always important. Like why are we outsourcing? Why are we moving this function away from this market to this market? Like what exactly is the problem we're trying to solve? And what exactly is the value that the solution delivers? A good example with customer support function, historically in many companies doesn't have like as much respect as many other sexier functions, right? Let's say customer support is seen as we just have to offer it, right? If customer does not get the product, well, it's too expensive for us to solve every single use case. There is customer support here. It's kind of a crutch, right? I never liked this mindset, but many companies think of it this way. And with this mindset, you only want to cut cost on this, right? Because it's basically a necessary evil that you have to maintain. So if we have to maintain it, let's cut costs as much as possible. What we've learned at Uber, for instance, for drivers who are mostly like, let's call it, more older people, right? It's not 20-year-old people. It's mostly 40, 50, 60 years old people, sometimes even older. For them, technology is not very simple to use, so they cannot even get onboarded themselves, right? With our best effort to build convenient tools for them, they still cannot make it through. So we learned that customer support is actually a customer acquisition tool. It's not a retention or something else. It's actually a customer acquisition tool which competes with marketing budget and efficiency and competes really well. So instead of spending money on marketing, well, why don't we invest more in support representatives, get phone support in place, get a lot more high-touch chat? And we've actually done all that stuff. I'm pretty proud of it. So outsourcing, you need to be questioning why we're doing it. It's important, but in many cases, you will get surprised that the better solution is something else.
The cost, I generally associate cost with time. And if you're a technology company and many developers think alike, many think differently. If they have to solve a problem, maybe you should find out if somebody else in the company has already built something instead of creating this pride in reinventing the wheel, right? So I think that's a huge cost saver if people can communicate, if they have a tool set deployed on their intranet that they can communicate with and discover what's out there already, right? So I think that saves a lot of money when you can just pick up something from within the organization. And also the second step is that when you're getting something from outside, then you can use open source if your organization allows. Of course, you have to take a look at the licensing agreements. Some licenses require you to put back the code base into the open source. So if you can do that, then do that. Otherwise, use the licenses that are more lenient, right? Like Apache, MIT, I think are a little bit more lenient than GPL. So those are the things how you can also save some cost on to building something.
One additional comment I want to make in this discussion is outsourcing versus, I think if you take a look at the world of AI, one is today the speed is critical, because if your company, certain decision, you cannot move as fast, you are going to be falling behind with the competition, and the marketplace is moving fast. With outsourcing, you cannot get there fast. Outsourcing at one point in was more of a cost-saving technique, but today, to survive in this market, you have to account for the speed. And so speed is a critical factor where AI plays a big role in that. Second is, even with outsourcing, with the massive data that's available that you can today mine and make decisions, that is not practically feasible with an outsourcing model. And it will take years and years by the time you get there. That speed. So I think speed and feasibility of AI is adding value, than a different set of value than with outsourcing that is not even possible.
Let me ask you about the big vision in the corporations, in your corporations. Is there a roadmap to automation, to intelligence and the AI-enabled enterprise? Is there a roadmap? Do you have an idea of where things are going, or what's leading you in the directions you're going, and who's leading you also? Good. And we could talk about that all afternoon. Every one of the topics, by the way, Anupam said it earlier, every one of the topics we're talking about could be the subject of massive discussions and long programs. So we're trying to cover things very quickly. I have a number of different topics I want to talk about, but this one, I think, because of the title of our program, I want to see what is the AI-enabled enterprise.
I mean, I can give two different perspectives, and the reason for that is in our company, there's a view and a vision on the product and the services side that we sell to our customers, and there is a vision and perspective on the operational side. They're not the same, because there's two different styles, and that's why I don't think we are looking at it as a single roadmap, quote unquote. Yeah. On the product side, as we are dealing with many different products, as well as moving more into services within VMware in partnership with Amazon and other things, in-product services are becoming, in-product experience are becoming much more critical. And then the product being self-aware, product being able to provide predictive advice, guidance to the customer, what the next steps, how to solve the problem, that's becoming much more prominent. So there is a big roadmap in terms of the products, making those products to be self-learning, as well as providing intelligence, guiding the customer. So that's one group of one stream of thinking. On the operational side, we are seeing a lot more of how do we make decisions quicker, faster, as well as ahead of and we are moving from a reactive organization to more of a preemptive, predictive organization, right? And the customer support world, that's the world that we are talking about, even on some of the other side around order management and such. How can I anticipate when the next customer is going to call with a customer support issue? How can I anticipate if this customer who has an issue, would this result in an escalation? And anticipate and prevent. So as an organization on the operational side, we are seeing that momentum, and AI, machine learning is critical in delivering and driving that. So that's the roadmap and the thinking, and the product side is more self-sufficient as the customers are using. How can we service them better? How can we provide better?
Is there someone at the top of the organization who's watching that whole thing?
I mean, obviously, overall company performance and all of these things are all tied together, but no, not at that level. Okay.
Yeah, Eric, I'll provide maybe two perspectives. I'll provide the perspective of Sutherland, the company, and you asked, is there a strategy? Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, we, as we know, we're members of this entire industry that are attempting to transform to become a little more digital-centric, software-centric. And so as part of that, yes, there is a absolutely from the very top, there's buy-in, there's incentive, motivation. The fact that we've created a digital center here in San Francisco is reflective of the buy-in of our company. So the short answer is for Sutherland, it's a matter of survival on the viability of the services going forward. I'll wear the second hat of what I see from our clients, though, and regarding roadmap. And I'll kind of echo what I saw from Anupam on some of the research you shared. And I think many companies are still very early and gestational in their journey, not started at all. One of the common inquiries I often get is they say, hey, can you come in and even help us draft this roadmap for us? And so that's sort of just I think it confirms a lot of what a lot of the research that was shared earlier. So I think, yeah, for service providers, technology companies, software companies, I think it's just a matter of this is the way you create things and value today.
So it's a good question. It's a complex question. I would say simple answer would be, at any point in time, in most of the teams, there are projects on the roadmap in some way related to automation or artificial intelligence, because again, this is the world we live in. Those projects deliver the value. But is roadmap actually centered around those projects or not? I think I'm more leaning towards the no answer, because the way we do product, like at least the way Uber does product and Tesla is also more leaning towards this on the digital side, is it all starts with customer insights and customer problems, because again, you cannot automate until you understand what the customer really wants and needs, right? And the problems are usually where product manager starts with the problem, right? Your whole role is to understand the problem deeply, and the inputs to understand the problem is the insights. So once you've sourced those insights, you understood the problem, then you build customer-focused strategies without even thinking about your company structure yet. So how can we solve those problems for our customers? What kind of initiatives need to be going? And then you map those initiatives basically in the real world, like, okay, this is my org structure. Those are the customer strategies, those are the teams, so what kind of strategies should each team be pursuing to solve for those needs? That actually is a useful exercise because it forces you to align your company structure with customer needs in many cases, because otherwise the mapping will just be pretty crazy. And once you've identified those team-level strategies, then you identify the projects within each, and many of those projects, again, will be automation, AI, simply because those are the best ways to solve customer problems. But that's the logic that makes me kind of most comfortable with as a product manager for customers and for company and for employees. So those are three kinds of stakeholders that I'm servicing, so I need to understand the needs for all of them, right? The customers who actually use the product, employees who build the product, and the investors who invest in the product. So once you've got it, once you've done this mental work, you will get some projects related to artificial intelligence in your roadmap.
Yeah. Any additional comments?
No, I think they covered very good stuff already.
So we're getting close to running out of time. There's still a couple of things we want to talk about. One thing that was mentioned in passing was the impact on people and jobs. And 100 years ago, half of the population of this country was focused on agriculture. Today, less than 2%. But we're feeding 5 times as many people. That perspective of change and transformation in the economy leads me to ask a little bit about what's going on with people. The elimination of routine jobs and tasks, particularly on the RPA side, not necessarily so much in some of the other areas, but it's freeing up employees. It's giving companies a choice with those employees. I'm wondering what's your experience been in your companies on people? Where is retraining coming? Is retraining happening? Or are jobs just going to be lost?
So my experience, as we talked about our RPA journey, when we started off with that first pilot, we actually did a crowdsourcing of ideas. So we kind of did the marketing campaign, got a lot of people excited about, and we did a crowdsourcing of ideas. We didn't go top-down. And that crowdsourcing of ideas, we actually went into the floor where the people were working and doing those repetitive tasks. And we said, what do you think is some of the ideas that we can automate? And I was blown away by the acceptance, as well as when they connected to the story, that it can allow them to do better work, improved work, and et cetera, et cetera. those ideas, we had about 50, 60 ideas collected to select one pilot that we said we are going to do. Where it came from that floor. It didn't come from, so I think the story that we painted is, and people were aligning to that to say, I don't want to do this tactical or repetitive task. I can do better job, I can do different things. So that was an interesting story I experienced when we painted the story in the right way. People were actually open, and they came forward with those ideas, and they said, I'm in, and here's something that I do today. I don't think I need to do this anymore. I don't like it. Take it away.
Phil, you're in a
Yeah.
labor-centric business. And automation is going to, RPA type automation impacts you more than anybody else on this panel.
Yeah, provocative topic, as we know. I tend to take a paradoxical view on this, because I always ask the questions what has been the net job creation as a result of the introduction of these technologies into our industry? And I actually have to look at myself in the mirror, because it hadn't been for the advent of the advances of these tools and sort of convergence of cloud and mobile and social, I don't think I'd have a job. There would be no need for what I bring to the table. So this is a very small example. I'm not saying that's universal. And also it does call into question sort of what does the minimum skill set need to look like for the future employee? I mean, will everybody in the future need to know Python, for example? So I think it challenges that. It puts a little pressure to society, from a societal perspective. That's the big view. I'll talk about maybe a small view. It's interesting at Sutherland, there have been new roles and job types and responsibilities have been created as a result of us introducing these technologies in our operations. We have agents, contact center agents, and many of those agents I call super agents, because they've just been operating at the ground level of our clients, and they have this institutional knowledge more than any machine has of really what's going on with a customer pattern or behavior. And so one of the challenges I threw out to the team, I said, look, we have got to get these super agents somehow feeding back to our machines so that we're developing richer experiences and better solutions. And so we've been we travel around, we find these individuals, and we've been putting them on training programs, and it's been quite frankly very motivating for them. Mm-hmm. They see how this can open up new opportunities. Now, I'm not saying that's going to be a universal silver bullet for everybody, but
isn't that what used to be called knowledge management?
Yeah, I mean, don't get me started on that topic, but yeah, it's really. I mean, someone mentioned crowdsourcing and clustering and swarming. I mean, there's ways to apply people to this problem. It's not 100%.
And is that a temporary thing? Because once you drain them of that memory, that knowledge, does that continue or does that role change?
Well, that's where it gets back to are we training people properly? Is the educational infrastructure equipping people properly? Big picture. So I think that's a kind of broader challenge. But I do think, look, we saw the numbers. I think there's 2x of the VC capital going into this. That's going into some creation of something.
And again, we're discussing job creation versus job replacement, right?
It may not be. I mean, your company's built differently and doing different things.
Yeah, I'm not a specialist, obviously, in, again, job creation, and it's obvious technology replaces displaces some of the jobs, changes the other jobs, and creates new ones. So the impact is quite complex, right? So you need to be deeply into the subject to understand the total impact on society. My take is genuinely impact on society is quite positive because average life duration goes up, health improves, people get taller, they just everything is improving, right? So you cannot build this view that what's going to happen if or when we're all replaced. So far, it's been actually pretty nice, right? The population only has started growing exponentially with all the technologies becoming more and more powerful. What I think is important to realize is the aspect of, again, creating completely new jobs as well as improving existing jobs is something which is happening, and it will be happening more and more and more. And in fact, the human productivity can be improved by probably even orders of magnitude, right? If you think of how much value can I create to people with all the new technologies, well, today you can teach millions of people, billions of people online, right? Today you can entertain billions of people online. So the whole scale which technology brings will be creating a lot of opportunities we cannot even think today about, right? So I deeply believe the net impact on society is positive. The jobs will be better. They will be more kind of creative. And again, it's like I cannot see any negative outcome. Let's put it this way.
No, I think that's sums up pretty much. I mean, everything
So,
else, that's pretty good.
We've covered a heck of a lot of ground. Anupam covered a lot of ground to begin with. How much, is this relevant to where you guys are? How many of you are at the beginning of your journey, your journeys, if you call it? Any questions for the panel on starting? Any questions? Yeah, go ahead.
On your earlier journeys, when you were talking about some of the projects that you did you guys actually have COEs already established when you had your in-house team develop some of these AI tools, or did you partner with third parties to do so? And if the latter, how was that experience?
Is it customer lifetime value? What is CLV?
Center of Excellence.
Oh, COEs. Uber has COEs. We deeply believe in this model.
But did you have that at the very beginning when you did the earlier projects? Or I guess I just want to hear about your earlier experiences on how you guys started. And, I mean, with us, we didn't have a COE. We still don't, but we partnered with a vendor to build these RPA solutions for us. And so I just wanted to know what your experience was, if you guys already had established COEs.
So I can share two perspectives. So when we started RPA, we had a process excellence COE, not an RPA COE. And as we were driving processing excellence, process improvement, that's where we realized that the opportunity exists. Now, any of these adoption starts with people. Without people, you cannot get the technology adopted or the best used in the deliver the value. So on the RPA side, we had the benefit of the process excellence, but we then needed to build a COE structure just focusing on that even within the process excellence, right? So we decided to do that, and then we have started to build that. On the AI side, again, I don't think that tools by themselves can solve. We also needed people because there's this domain of people called data scientists that are kind of into this as well as building and helping. So we had to get a group of people that are kind of oriented, knowledgeable, had experience to start to work with these tools and look at some of the business problems, say where the right applicability is, how do we use this to deliver the best value and all of that. So there's also, again, it started off with people at some early stages, but it slowly morphed into a practice area.
Yeah, and I can add to that from some of the experiences of our customers. The best way to look at it is as RPA or AI as a sort of utility, right? So you have to, first of all, do some smaller pilots to figure out how applicable it is across the organization, across a few use cases. But then when you start finding those use cases and you start seeing some benefits, then very quickly, you want to scale it up. But you don't want different businesses and different divisions to start off their own sort of pilot initiatives, or what we call do their own random acts of automation. You want a little bit of structure, cohesion, so that you can capture the best practices, the learnings. You can have a centralized tool of vendors and partners you want to work with, right? And you also want some governance. So Center of Excellence is by far the most preferred route for most companies. But then there are some companies that don't want to get into it at all. They just want to outsource everything to a third party. And those third parties procure the tools, they do the implementation, do the management end to end. And the companies just use that as a service. So, but I would say 2/3 of the companies are going the COE route. Yeah.
But it is going to go into more of a usage model from the subscription concept that he talked about.
Correct.
Where I don't care about the infrastructure, I don't care about people, I just need the service.
Yeah. And frankly, a lot of the AI tools are available for free right now. If you go to just google.ai, you can find all kinds of tools there that, as an individual, as an organization, you can start building applications and applets right away, okay? But it's about how you apply the right use cases, how do you, as you talked about, it's a people angle. You need to coach your people to work along with those AI and automation tools. So there's a lot of cultural elements to it that have to be handled.
There's a question back?
Yeah, actually, sort of extending what Anupam said, right? And a question for Partha. Like, I mean, earlier in the conversation, you mentioned about, maybe I got the feeling that outsourcing and automation sort of are distinct sets. And I wanted to just comment on that because I think a lot of automation can be done in an outsourcing context, right? So the outsourcing drivers in the past were different, whether it was labor, whether it was location, staff augmentation, and now you can have robo-banks which can provide automation. This is an outsourced kind of thing, so you have those facilities. You need integrator to out the automation tool. So those kind of things could coexist. So I just wanted to comment on that because for some reason I felt you were treating it.
No, absolutely. I think I think what you are highlighting also, the outsourcing model is changing as well to provide different sets of services than the traditional, the labor and the arbitrage services earlier, right? The comparison that I was making was more from an AI perspective. If you take a business problem to say, if I get 100,000 service requests or cases or support ticket today, can I do sentiment analysis and predict at the time a customer calls to say how happy or the sad the customer is, and I expect the agent to react appropriately? You cannot do that by outsourcing, right? That particular part, you need AI, you need to churn through the data, you need to be able to automatically do sentiment analysis and guide that service agent or support agent to say, you know what, this customer is pissed off, be nice to this customer, right? Or whatever it is. But the point I was trying to make is some of those business problems, because we have massive data that we need to churn through, and we need to drive insight to do this next. That was probably earlier not existing because you said about that data not existing, right? Today, that problem cannot be outsourced. You need tools, you need techniques, you need these this kind of models to be able to do that. That was the comparison I was trying to highlight.
And I think what you're touching upon is the whole aspect of customer experience.
Correct.
Right? And there itself, there is like a front office aspect, there is a middle office, back office aspect. And some of these tasks could get done at different points of the value chain, like the analysis of where the data resides.
Okay, so you gave very good examples of innovation within the company, all of us. So I was curious to know how much of that innovation is also being driven by partners. So you took a lot of examples of like an internal initiative. So like I come from the financial industry where there's fintech, insurtech. So they are kind of like competing as well as bringing new innovation. So in your respective industries, how much of the innovation is coming through partnering with startup companies, accelerators, clients, consortiums? So we'd love to know more about that.
Yeah, I mean, in Innovation Center at Visa, we partner with the issuers and merchants and do pilots along with them. So that means we do shared development also in some cases. So yeah, so we have 3 different types of innovation projects. One is like this example where we partner with a client and do that together. The other is that we come up with some innovative idea, but then it's also supported by the product, and we also start evangelizing that within the company. The third type is that we create all these innovative tool set for our own selves, which are not product, but they are engineering innovation only. So we have these 3 different streams at Innovation Centers.
Yes, please.
So this is to Wesley. I was reading an article about Tesla, and I read that Tesla is working on a car that will make a decision making if there's a collision ahead of the car. So it's just like if there's a car, there's a child, and there's a mother.
Mm-hmm.
And if there's a driver and car has to make a decision who to save, either mother or child or the driver.
The ethical dilemma you're saying, right?
Yes, it's like AI is a threat to the human life.
Moral dilemma of AI.
Yeah.
How do you see that?
So you're asking for my personal opinion on whether we should be doing I'm not building.
You give a disclaimer about Tesla.
Yes. Thank you for the question. I'm not making decisions on those topics, and those are tough topics, right? I did take my ethics classes, and there is so many of sub-dilemmas within this dilemma, right? In some cases, they ask you, would you push the person on the rails to save 5 people. Okay, you wouldn't, but would you mind if somebody else pushes the person around? So I'm trying to say that there is so much complexity in your question that if you go deeper, okay, like if the car explicitly does not try to save one person's life in favor of 2, then there is always a more complex flavor of the same dilemma you still will be facing, right? So I do not know what the company stands on this. I haven't seen public statements on this, but to the best of my knowledge, we're trying to get driving safer. Like the definition of safety, I just haven't seen it yet, right? So I know that we're trying to reduce total number of accidents because currently fatality happens every 100 million miles in the United States. And you're talking about million fatalities in the world, like it's million lives. It's like there is no wars in this earth enough to consume so many lives. So the company will definitely drive that number down. I honestly don't know how it's going to be dealing with those dilemmas.
But it may push the sales down, like for Tesla.
Huh?
Nobody would like to buy a car that can put someone's life on risk.
No, but this argument, here I actually disagree because it's a probabilistic life. You don't know what's going to happen to you next time, right? You bought an insurance or you didn't buy an insurance. Like life sends you certain outcomes. And if you know that everybody else's cars are also acting in this way, so when you have a family of 5 people in the car, then you can be safe because a lot of cars are acting this way, right? So it's actually quite questionable statement that people will be skeptical. I think they should love it because, again, when everyone behaves like this, it's good for society. And ultimately, there is a chance we will not even be allowed to drive as humans, right, as soon as cars are good enough.
But if you take that question a little bit generic, the moral dilemma of decision making, as more and more we start to depend on technology, we cannot live without iPhone today or a smartphone. All of our phone numbers, we don't even remember that, right? We have started to become dependent on technology to help us. Now, obviously, there's a gray line between when you become fully dependent, you cannot do without, and what the sensitivity of that decision making is. I think we are going to start to see in everywhere this is becoming a question everybody needs to think about and answer.
Yeah. And statistically, I mean, autonomous vehicles will have a safer driving record than a human being, right? But to your point, biases can exist, and the biases could come from people that are actually programming those systems, feeding data, and they could reflect even personal biases, gender bias or ethnicity bias or whatever, right? So there's 2 approaches largely in terms of how these systems are being made more intelligent. One is the Tesla, Google way, Apple way, whoever is experimenting with these autonomous vehicles, which is a controlled sort of experiment. They have their own cars driving around and gathering data. There's another approach, which is the swarm intelligence, which I have on my slide, under the company called Comma, C-O-M-M-A.ai. That's using that swarm intelligence approach. They actually give away a plug-in device. It's a $99 device you can actually just buy and plug into your car as long as it's a newer vehicle. And it gathers all the data and gathers the driving patterns, and it intelligently learns how average human being drives. It's not a control experiment. And in that case, truly, I think biases and all these things will be determined by the population at large, right? So again, there's 2 different approaches. We don't know which is going to ultimately work or not work, but that's an important question I think that the industry has to answer.
Well, we can have this discussion. Frankly, my question is, why don't they pay me to put that in the car? Why am I paying for that?
Well,
but that's a whole other question. We had a good little discussion of ethics, but I think we really covered a broad array of topics. I really want to thank you for sharing your expertise and experience with us, Sumit, Vasily, Philip, Partha. We're going to be here during the coming break. If you want if you want to have some more questions, please feel free to talk with us.
Thank you, Eric, and thank you, panelists. Great insights, I think. So I think we're running a little bit behind, so we have a break now. 20-minute break, okay, so we'll be back at